What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where me and my good friend over there, Dr. Zayas God, Danny Torkel, talk about horror movies and streaming shows. We're starting up a new segment right now, which I'm going to call it Beyond Horror. And so we're going to talk about things that aren't necessarily horror, but they can always have horror elements. Let me see how many times I can fucking say horror in 5 minutes. But we're going to tackle some David Lynch stuff because apparently Danny is a gigantic Twin Peaks fan. We might cover some movies from other countries and stuff that aren't necessarily horror movies either. But as Danny delves into David Lynch and he sees his movies, we've already covered Mulholland Drive. This time around, Danny has watched all of the original 2 seasons of Twin Peaks. So you're like a full-on fan at this point, huh?
Hold on. I got this. I did a video. Charlotte and I did a video of us going to Monster Mania, and we showed off our haul. So in the laundry right now is my new Twin Peaks shirt from Studio House Designs. I'll shout them out. And then I got this also that I'm gonna hang in my bedroom.
Very cool.
Damn fine cup of coffee right there.
Excellent. Nice.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I was telling you before we started recording Yellow Jackets. I pride myself on getting to the movie theater 100 times a year. I have Regal Unlimited. There's a Regal 5 minutes from my house. I had not been to a movie since Captain America mid-February. It's been like 5 weeks since I had been to a movie at the Regal. And the reason for that is very simple. I got hooked on Twin Peaks. It was 30 episodes, 46 minutes an episode, 50 minutes an episode. And I would come home for about 3 weeks straight. I'd come home and I'd be like, well, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to probably go to a movie tonight. I was like, well, I could definitely get in 1, maybe 2 episodes of Twin Peaks before I go to bed. And I ended up watching the entire series in about 3.5 weeks. Then I watched Fire Walk with Me, which is what we're going to talk about today. I love that. I will say, and this is not a review of the Twin Peaks show, everyone who told me season 2 gets a little crazy and goes a little off the rails. Had I been watching this in 1990, and I watched those episodes,
right,
and then had to wait a week for another episode, I do admit I might have put a little halt on the show.
Yeah.
But it's 2025. Paramount Plus has the entire show, plus the return streaming, and the ability to binge, especially post episode 9 of season 2. Episode 9 is when you find out who killed Laura Palmer.
Right.
Or Pete can just tell you 2 episodes before that.
Oh, shit. I'm sorry. Oh, God. I forgot. Yeah, go ahead.
From episode 10 to episode 19, that is a long stretch of weird, wild, not necessarily great television.
Right.
Great parts, but overall you're kind of like, what is going on here?
Right.
And then it pulls it back together in the last couple episodes and it gets really good. And then Fire Walk with Me. You said Beyond Horror. I have my copy of David Weiner's new awesome In Search of Darkness, 1990 to 1994.
Yeah.
And Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is one of the movies covered in 1992, I believe it came out.
Yes, yeah.
And it is one of the movies covered. And if it's good enough for David Weiner in the In Search of Darkness series, then it's good enough for me to simply call it a horror film, because I think it really does focus on, it's really about Laura Palmer all the way up to her murder, which is horrific, and is very, scary stuff. And there's a lot of, typically crazy Lynchian things in this film. It felt to me, and you obviously have a much longer history with Twin Peaks,
Mhm.
So it felt to me, again, as somebody who just binged 30 episodes of the show,
Right.
it felt to me like a really good 2 episode prequel that
Mhm.
just happened to be rated R and contains nudity.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people disliked this movie when it came out. My wife actually dislikes this movie, and she's a huge Twin Peaks fan. I want to give a shout out to a YouTube channel that I'm going to use a lot for this discussion. They're called Malm Rose Projects, and the YouTuber that made these videos, they just went through all of David Lynch's works. And so they went through Fire Walk with Me, and I watched that video. I'm actually still in the middle of it because it's extensive. And they referenced Twin Peaks: The Return in this video, this review. Like Fire Walk with Me, it's interesting because I watched Twin Peaks, the show. Then years later, I watched The Return. And I loved The Return just for how weird it was and stuff. And then I watched Fire Walk with Me. And it's so interesting because Fire Walk with Me seems so much more like Twin Peaks: The Return versus Twin Peaks: The Show. And like there's a change in David Lynch's filmmaking after Fire Walk with Me. And Malmrose says that in their videos. They say that his movies change in style. Like the movies before Fire Walk with Me make more sense narratively, except for Eraserhead, right? But like Elephant Man, Dune, I guess you could say, right? Blue Velvet, all of these movies kind of make more sense narratively, even though they have weird kind of David Lynch things in them. Then it starts to get more surreal and abstract after Fire Walk with Me. So another thing that Malmrose says a lot in the videos is how Twin Peaks, the show, can be kind of funny and quirky. Of course, there's the darkness in the show, but Fire Walk with Me is very dark. It's like this dark kind of parallel to Twin Peaks, you know?
Well, I think that has to do a lot with the characters, and so I definitely loved pardon the pun, or not even a pun, just pardon the expression, but peak Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay, that's not so bad. Yeah,
is better, in my opinion, than Fire Walk with Me.
okay.
And what I loved about Twin Peaks, and what really more than anything hooked me into this show, was I felt genuine love and affection for 90% of the characters in this show.
Yeah.
I loved the characters in the show. And a lot of those characters are not in the movie. And it makes sense. It's a prequel. It's set, it's leading up to. So yes, you do have, it also does feel like sometimes some of the characters from the series show up in the movie.
Right.
Just because it's called Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me.
Right.
Right? Like, so you're sitting there and and I guess like we're obviously going to talk spoilers because the movie came out 33 years ago.
Right.
And the show came out 35 years ago. So like, that Leo Johnson has to be there at the end. Like, that. Like, that's like established lore. He has to be in that like train car at the end. And so you're kind of sitting there going, okay, so, where is Leo Johnson? Okay, there he is. Okay, good. I think my favorite part of the show, like I said, were these amazing characters. I said to you, I think I either told you this or I texted you this. I'm going to be 43 years old. I have 0 tattoos on my body. I'm strongly considering getting a Bookhouse Boys tattoo.
Right.
I love the Bookhouse Boys. I love the Sheriff Harry S. Truman, Hawk, Andy, even what's Lucy. Like, I love everyone in the town.
Yes.
I love Log Lady. There's so many just bonkers characters that all fit in this show. And, it's Kyle MacLachlan's show, but he's not the main character of the movie. The main character of Fire Walk with Me is Laura Palmer.
Right.
And that is almost jarring because of how little Laura Palmer is actually in.
The
You know,
show.
Cheryl Lee is only really in Twin Peaks as her cousin.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No,
So
I know.
it's
Yeah, go ahead.
that is a little jarring. It's a little jarring to have watched like 30 episodes of the show and then you're watching a 2-hour movie where almost very few of those characters you love are there, and the main character is somebody who dies in the first episode off screen.
Right. Well, okay, going along with that, my wife was saying how so much of the original Twin Peaks show is people's reactions and dealing with Laura Palmer's death, grieving Laura Palmer, uncovering things about Laura Palmer's life. Like Laura Palmer's life is so intriguing. And Malmrose, in their videos, they talk about how there are these kind of archetypes that we have for different types of people in society. And one of them is archetypes for women. And they talk about how there's sort of like this virginal good girl archetype. And then there's this sort of like this whore, right? The nun and the whore archetypes. And, Laura Palmer is a literal prostitute in Twin Peaks, but then she's also a girl that delivers Meals on Wheels and meets with this like socially awkward guy. And she was the homecoming queen. You know, her parents have this image they're trying to show of her of like this suburban kind of family, but then she also has this crazy dark side. And that's what I love about David Lynch. I think I might have said this to you. I know I definitely said it to Mike Bongiorno, but like Guillermo del Toro, he met Mark Frost a bunch of times. I think he's actually friends with Mark Frost, the co-creator of Twin Peaks, and he's only met David Lynch a handful of times. But Guillermo del Toro says that David Lynch is not ironic at all. That like David Lynch is into his weird, quirky shit, his dark stuff, but then he's also truly into the Americana and the simple things too. Like he loves both. And probably the main reason why I love David Lynch is because he's like David Bowie, who's in this fucking movie, where like there's billions of humans that have existed, and just probability wise, you're gonna get these fucking random creatures that exist every so often. And David Lynch is one of them. David Bowie's one of them. There's a couple others, but they're these rare birds. And he grew up in this sort of, middle America kind of life. And his parents just were very encouraging for his pursuits. And he just happened to like get into meditation and like painting and being an artist. And he's not a fucking guy that like makes movies to make money or like to be a celebrity. He has a vision for an idea. He gets it from his fucking meditations and then he just makes it into a movie.
Yeah, if he was a director who was making movies to make money, he's not making the right movies, because movies that are as out there and as weird as the ones he makes typically have niche audiences.
Right.
But so I think that is part of why I love the show so much, because you have this idea that in small town America, now neither of us are from small town America. You might live closer to that now than I do. But like I went to college in small town America.
Binghamton,
and you do meet some of the weirdest fucking people that you will ever meet. I'll never forget, like, one of the first times that my buddy, sophomore year college, he was able to bring a car up because he wasn't a freshman anymore, and he had a car, and we would, he was my roommate, so we used his car to go everywhere. And everywhere in Binghamton was like to Walmart and back, to the diner and back, to the movie theater and back. And one time we were heading to Walmart and we turned where we thought was going into the parking lot, and we turned like, I guess, one turn before the parking lot, and we ended up in like a trailer park, and we were like, Mike, let's get the fuck out of here, because like there were like people sitting on like the doors of like their trailers, and I was like, I've seen Deliverance, I need to get the fuck out of here. Like I feel like in small town just south of the border, Washington, there might be a woman who shows up to the diner with her log.
Yes.
And I love that about him. So I also, and I know we're talking about Fire Walk with Me, but I also just rewatched Blue Velvet.
Oh, okay. Okay. Nice. Nice.
And I think Blue Velvet may be my favorite David Lynch movie of the
Okay.
ones that I've seen.
Right.
And I also think that Blue Velvet is almost a trial run for Twin Peaks.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
Frank Booth is basically a trial run for Bob slash Leland, spoiler alert.
Right.
Um, like Kyle MacLachlan's character is not that different. His relationship with Laura Dern is similar to his relationship with um, Sherilyn Fenn.
Aubrey.
In, yeah, Audrey.
Audrey.
Uh,
Audrey. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
I work with someone named
Um,
Audrey. Yeah.
you know, the scene where they go to Dean Stockwell's house is as Twin Peaks a moment as you're gonna get in a pre-Twin Peaks movie.
Right. Right.
And I just love that movie so much. And I liked watching that and Fire Walk with Me kind of back to back because I felt that there's so many friggin' parallels between them. I want to ask you about the beginning of
Yeah.
Fire Walk with Me
Do it.
because the first David Lynch movie we talked about was Mulholland Drive.
Correct.
And this opening scene reminded me a lot of the opening scene in Mulholland Drive.
Okay.
In the sense that you're introduced to two characters who you assume are going to be kind of main characters
Right.
in this movie.
Right.
I felt like you're introduced to two FBI agents played by Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland,
Right.
and they're investigating the murder of Teresa Banks, who is the girl killed by Bob before Laura Palmer. And they're investigating. They go to a diner, they go to a trailer park. You meet David Lynch, and you get this wild scene with this woman in a dress, and she's weirdly giving clues to them about what's going on. And this goes on for
Lil.
15 to 20 minutes, maybe
Yeah.
longer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then there's a scene with David Bowie, who says, I believe, one word, two words.
No. He comes in, he says, we're not going to talk about Judy. He's like, do you know who this man is? And he's pointing to Kyle MacLachlan. He says a few things,
But then it's like they disappear, and then it says 1 year later.
Right.
And you never see these characters again. And I'm like, that's like the two guys in the diner and the mystery woman who turns out to be Bonnie Aarons as the monstrous hobo in Mulholland Drive. They're like, it turns out they're not main characters at all. They're just guys who got filmed. And again, I think that from what you're saying, it feels like David Lynch is a filmmaker who sometimes in the middle of his movies is like, okay, we have the movie going over here, and oh, who are these people? They're interesting. Let me film them for a few minutes. Oh shit, I have a movie going.
Yeah.
And
so, yeah.
It just feels like it felt like the opening of the movie was a different movie.
Yes. Oh, no. Without a doubt.
And it was very, very strange.
Yeah. But see, that's the way that David Lynch is, right? And it's really interesting to me because when you're creative, when you're making things, you sometimes get random inspirations just out of the blue, right? And you see things, you're like, oh, maybe we could work this in. And a lot of times you'll have like an editor or someone that's working with you that's like, no, that's going to derail it. It's not going to make sense. But with David Lynch, I think people have always had faith in him that what he envisions is going to work. Now, I've taken David Lynch's masterclass, right? And I've read his book, Room to Dream, where he talks about meditation, where he talks about filmmaking, where he talks about
he wrote a book.
So a woman wrote it with him, and then I listened
Okay.
to the audiobook, which is like the woman's writing, but then it's also him giving anecdotes on
And
what she said.
does he do it? Like, because I have an Audible subscription with Athena, and I'm almost done with the book I'm reading, and that's like the thing that I'm like dying to read now.
Yeah. It's one half this woman talking about his life. It's like he grew up here, then this, right? And then it's David Lynch saying like, oh well, I went to the store and I got a cookie, like just get that fucking book, Room to Dream. All right, but
Okay.
anyway, my point I'm trying to make though is that in his masterclass, in Room to Dream, he talks about how getting ideas for art, getting ideas for movies, whatever, is like fishing, where you're basically just putting a line out into your subconsciousness and then you pull this idea out and then it's your idea. It's your job to take it and make it into something. So he gets struck by ideas all the time. That's why there's such weird imagery. Now, things that you hear when people talk about David Lynch are that his movies are non-linear, that like it's not necessarily a straightforward timeline. You kind of jump around in time. Another thing is that I always hear this: his movies are dreamlike, that you feel like you're watching a dream. Twin Peaks, they literally say like we're living inside a dream, like multiple times, right?
I remember, I think I texted you when I was like 3 episodes into the show, and I was like, if we find out that this show is all an episode of that uh, soap opera that they keep watching on TV, I'm gonna be so mad at you.
Yes, no. But see, that's the thing is he doesn't do that. And another thing that he does, though, is that he does the multiple perspectives on the same scenario. Mulholland Drive is the greatest example of that, where it's like you have Diane and then you have, I can't remember the other personality, but like where there's two conflicting stories, right? And so that's what Fire Walk with Me is like, too, because you have this weird fucking town where they're investigating the Teresa Banks murder, which is it's called Deer Meadow, and that's where we get Harry Dean Stanton is in it, right? And all the stuff with Randy Travis and Chris Isaac, not Randy Travis, Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland. And in the Malmrose video, she's talking about how it's like an inverse of Twin Peaks, where Twin Peaks is like this nice, happy place, but it's got this darkness to it. This place is just this shitty town. And she even talked about how there's parts in America and just in the whole world in general where they get so bad that like people really can't live there. They're like just horrible, worn down areas. And she's saying that, this place is like that this Deer Meadow is like that. And when you watch Twin Peaks: The Return, they don't just stay in Twin Peaks. Actually, a lot of it doesn't take place in Twin Peaks. A lot of it is in other places. And like, to me, it's just interesting. It's like they fill in all the little, they like hit the details that you know from the show, but I still don't feel like it gives answers in this movie. Do you feel that way too?
I mean, I feel like this movie opens up a ton of new questions while
Right.
I mean, because the problem is, as a prequel, it's not supposed to answer any questions. It's just kind of showing you up to where Twin Peaks gets you to.
Right.
I do like. I thought that the movie. I liked the movie, and I like the scenes with Laura Palmer. I like how Cheryl Lee does a really good job of showing the multiple sides of her.
Yep.
How she's this like tortured soul whose, spoilers, father, as like a possessed monstrous entity, has been like raping her for years. I watched Twin Peaks, and I never knew if Laura Palmer knew her father was Bob.
Yeah.
She does whisper it to him in the red room in the dream. My father killed me. But they never really give you the idea that like Leland was that openly crazy.
Right.
And I thought they went a little extreme with that in the movie. I like his wife in the show, first episode of the show, she has that amazing scene where she looks down and Bob is staring up at her, and you're like, holy fuck. And then in the movie, it's like, it's so obvious that Leland is
Bob.
This like, abusive rapist monster.
Yeah.
That I almost felt like that went a little too much, but I
Sure.
loved Cheryl Lee's performance.
Yeah.
Like, not to be like perverted, but there's like that scene in the nightclub with her and Lara Flynn Boyle,
Right.
Moira Kelly.
Right.
There's the scene with her and Donna in the nightclub, and they're both like getting sexually assaulted, and they're both topless, and it's maybe the least sexy nudity I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah.
And I think that it's perfect for that. Like it's not supposed to be. Like if you're sitting there watching that scene being like, yeah, all right, there is something tragically wrong with you and you need to seek help. Like Cheryl Lee, Moira Kelly, gorgeous women, but like and again, we have young female children. Not that even matters. Like we're both good human beings. Like there's nothing like sexy about watching sexual assault take place.
Yeah. No.
And this movie makes you very uncomfortable watching it.
Yes.
Because that's part of what the whole fucking movie, Twin Peaks is about, the whole Laura Palmer situation. And it's tragic. And I thought Cheryl Lee did such a good job when she's shown to be that tragic character. Like, yeah, she's in the nightclub with this guy who she's basically getting money from to fuck. But she's not there because she wants to be there. It's like she just has to, it's like almost her way of escaping the horrors of Bob. But then, like, she has Harold, who she confides with. She has James, who she confides with. I think after seeing this movie, it confirms to me that my least favorite character in all of Twin Peaks is James. Because
James.
There's... And I have no problem with the actor. I actually like the actor. I remember him from a boxing movie, Gladiator, that came out, like, in 1992.
Oh, okay, cool.
He plays a boxer opposite Cuba Gooding Jr.
Oh, okay. That's
yeah, really, really cool movie. But like, there's nothing to that character. He's just a goody two shoes, like sad romantic character. And the only time I felt I was ever bored with the series was when it was him and Donna drama, or the weird episode where there's like a 2-episode arc where he gets involved with that blonde woman and her mysterious brother lover person.
Yes.
And it just, like, that character bored me, where no other character in the show, I either disliked the character because I was supposed to, or I love the character, or it's a kind of a throwaway character, but they're at least played well and funny, and there's weird stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. So that one character, whether it's Fire Walk with Me or the movie, I can do without James.
Yeah. Well, like, there's a bunch of men in Laura Palmer's life. That's actually one of the points that Malmrose makes. And obviously I keep mentioning this person over and over again because I just thought that their review was so good. Like, you should go check out their channel, guys, if you haven't, if you're into this conversation. But she talks about how the town of Twin Peaks fails Laura Palmer. She's in the suburban life, and she's getting abused by her father. She's going to be murdered, and all the men have a different kind of role for her. She's a prostitute so she can make money to get drugs so that she can deal with the pain and the fear and all this kind of madness in her head. Cheryl Lee, she is like so incredibly emotive with her eyes. She gives so many looks in this movie that are just fucking like works of art. Just the way that she looks, like just at people and stuff, her reactions to people, so good. And obviously David Lynch is obsessed with her scream. You'll see, especially if you watch Twin Peaks: The Return, where her scream actually kind of has some significance. But it's so interesting because one thing we didn't talk about yet is how much of an impact Twin Peaks has had. And I think that this movie has had too, right? Because this movie is a prequel and it came out in 1992. Now, I think that like the prequels for Star Wars started in 1999. And I think that's when our society started to become like, hey, we have to know how Jack Sparrow got that one bead on his fucking hat, right? Like, we need to know all these details. And that's the way that our society is now. We have to know all the details. We have to see how these things happen.
Do you mean Han himself? Hence he was Solo?
Oh, God, Danny, come on, man. Come on. What are you trying to do here? We're talking about Twin Peaks. Good stuff, okay? So anyway,
you mentioned prequels.
Okay, sorry. That is a prequel too. Very good point. But like Twin Peaks, the show, I think had so much of an impact on society because it's like pre the X-Files. I was a little kid when Twin Peaks was on TV, right? It was so fucking scandalous. My mom would watch this show and she'd constantly be telling me to like look away or go in my room and stuff because there's like everybody's banging everybody else. There's drugs, like everyone's on drugs.
Small town America.
Right, exactly. But that's the beauty of it. Only David Lynch can make that where it is equally wholesome, quirky cheese, but then it's also like dark, depraved. Like, because, you were talking about this scene where these girls are assaulted, right? And they're beautiful women. David Lynch obviously has an eye for beauty in general, but he sees it in his women. The cast of Twin Peaks is beautiful. So he's able to have this sort of modern, lustful vision of the world, but then also this prudish, suburban view. He's able to do them both simultaneously. And it's amazing. That's what Twin Peaks is. It's like, here's this veneer and here's the grime underneath, right?
Yeah.
And this movie is really heavy on the grime. Like, you're just right in the fucking grime the whole time. I mean, I'm dying to talk about Twin Peaks: The Return with you because there's so much from this that leads to that. But what I wanted to talk about a few things in this, though. I love that fucking sequence when you see that little kid with the fucking mask on that looks like he's from Slipknot. And then you got Bob there. You got the little guy. What do they call the little guy?
I am the man in the room.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing I also wanted to bring up too, when I was talking about like time not being linear in David Lynch's works, this is a great example of that because you have Annie show up in Laura Palmer's bed, and Annie's like, Dale is in the red room with me, but that's in the past, whereas that takes place at the end of Twin Peaks. It's like crazy. Yeah. Anything that has to do with the red room stuff, it could like literally be any point in time.
Yeah.
And you're going to see that. Go ahead, dude.
No, it's just, it's interesting because like you're talking about like his style. When I got to Binghamton, I tried to major in cinema. I took a bunch of like cinema prerequisites. And then when I got to like the middle of sophomore year, it dawned on me that like the cinema that they focused on there was like very artistic, very non-linear. And at that point in my life, I was like, this is not for me. I'm like, when I think of non-linear storytelling, I think of like Pulp Fiction, like
right.
where
Memento.
where it's an easy story to follow, but it's just told out of order. Right. This was not. They were not into. They were into like very artistic, like art house stuff, and it wasn't for me. And even as I've gotten older, there's a lot of like experimental style movies that I'll watch. Skinamarink is a great example where like Skinamarink just wasn't for me. Some people loved it. They called it their scariest movie of the year of whatever year it came out. And I watched it and I went, I can't. I like this movie is a really good idea for 20 minutes. And my Lord in heaven, why is it lasting this long? David Lynch is really, and again, I have limited exposure. I have seen Eraserhead. I've seen Mulholland Drive, of course, Blue Velvet, and Fire Walk with Me, and all of the original Twin Peaks.
Right.
And he is kind of the only time in my life where I've really embraced that almost experimental cinema. But I think it has to do with while things are weird, and a lot of stuff doesn't make sense, and there's what time jumps and characters that come and go as they please. Whatever is on screen at a given moment in a David Lynch film, like
Yep.
Fire Walk with Me, or in the show, you're mesmerized by it. And
Yep.
so,
Yep.
like when I walked out of Mulholland Drive, if you said to me, "So, Danny, what's that movie about?" I would have said, "I have no idea."
Right.
But I sat there for 2.5 hours, and I was completely riveted for 2.5 hours
Right.
because the stuff he puts on screen is just infinitely watchable, and the characters that he writes are, as weird as they are, they feel like they can be people that you know. And so, like, all the stuff with the Red Room, I'm not going to lie and say, oh, yeah, of course I understand it all, because I
Right.
don't.
Right.
But it never bothers me because it's, so well acted, so interesting. It's so weird. Uh, but it's done in that David Lynch style that like
Yeah.
only he can do. Like no other filmmaker I feel like can make a movie like the movies he makes, and I would watch them and go, "Man, that was great." Instead, I'd probably walk out and be like, "I can't believe I wasted 2.5 hours on that shit."
Right. Right. Well, there are definitely people that you could feel like they're trying to do something like it, and they might not be directly inspired by him, but their movies give you that kind of weird feeling. I think of who's the guy that did Poor Things. That guy who did like Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Uh, uh, Yorgos Lanthimos. I could
Right.
definitely see where he
Yeah.
has, yeah, with a movie like The Lobster or
Right.
Killing of a Sacred Deer, or even
Right.
his latest film, Kinds of Kindness.
Oh, I haven't seen that
Like,
one. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a David Lynch vibe to those movies.
Right, and then like I think like Paul Thomas Anderson too will have like you watch Punch Drunk Love or something, you're like, what the fuck is this, right? So I think that there are people that try to do that sort of surreal, weird, quirky vibe. It's just like David Lynch kind of brought it before everybody else, And like if I wanted to kind of talk about Fire Walk with Me like a little bit more, to me, like it's just so interesting how it's like compartmentalized. There's the stuff with Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland. Then there's this brief thing with Kyle MacLachlan, but then just Kyle MacLachlan's presence is enough to kind of tie it all back to Twin Peaks, even though he's barely in the movie. Like there's this one part where Albert comes up to him and he's like, "Oh, who's the next victim?" And he's like, "She's a teenager and she's on drugs, and she's prostituting herself or she's sexually active." And Albert's like, "Oh, that's half the teenage girls in the country, right?"
Every time Albert is on screen, I miss Miguel Ferrer so
Right.
much. He was one of my favorite actors growing up because of RoboCop, because of this horror movie, Deep Star 6,
Oh,
that
another
he's
one,
in.
yeah.
And he always plays this like obnoxious, sarcastic, sometimes a bad person. And I love watching him as like this sarcastic good guy in Twin Peaks. One of my favorite moments in all of Twin Peaks has to do with him, and the sheriff and Hawk and Big Ed, and their moments together. So
Yeah.
I was happy to see him in Fire Walk with Me, even if it was just the one scene.
Yeah, and fucking David Lynch is in it, and it's fucking great. He does that weird thing where he puts his hands in front of, like, you always see that in like David Lynch montages and gifs of him and stuff. That just that whole sequence with Lil where she comes out and she's doing all those weird faces and making all these weird gestures with her hands, and then it gets all broken down by Chris Isaac. That's what David Lynch is, because you would look at that and you'd be like, that's nonsense. Then he goes and explains everything like this, like crazy clever FBI agent, and you're like, oh, this makes sense. But then you also think to yourself, but it's still stupid as hell, right? Like she's making all these faces, right? But the Blue Rose thing, that's something that plays into. I mean, Danny, I'm just dying to fucking watch The Return again because I like it so much. I think you might actually hate it though, honestly.
Well,
You're,
again, I have the ability. I have the ability to binge it instead of
Yeah,
watching it and then waiting for it. So
yeah,
maybe that'll.
right.
My love for Twin Peaks. I will promise you this: love it or hate it, I will finish it.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
because I'm
Yeah,
so obsessed with Twin Peaks right now, from the show, from this movie, and David Lynch as a whole, that I really do want to get into the show. And it, we're gonna review it for the Lacercast. That just gives me added motivation. And if I hate it, at least I got a little bit more Twin Peaks. Before it ended.
nice, nice, nice. Yeah, and before David Lynch ended, he did the Tarantino thing. He did 10 movies. I don't think it was intentional that he just stopped at 10, but that's just the way his life kind of worked out, where he made 10 movies. And believe it or not, I'm kind of a bit of a poser, Danny, because I've not seen all 10 of those movies. I've seen pretty much the same things that you have at this point too.
Have you
But
seen Lost Highway?
I have not.
I feel like I'm talking myself into. I don't want to drive into Staten Island tonight to see a movie, but I'm also talking myself into it because I've never seen Lost Highway and I had never seen Mulholland Drive before I saw it in the theater. Alamo just caught up with um, IFC, and is like doing their tribute to David Lynch. The Brooklyn Alamo, I've kind of stopped going to because they're in the middle of like union situations, and there's
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
and I don't really feel comfortable going to the Staten Island Alamo, but there's nobody there anyway.
Right, 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 right. Well, you know what you do? You got to stop at that Applebee's when you go there. Right by it.
I'll just show up. I'll order every appetizer and a bunch of Sam Adams, and we'll be good.
Oh man, still one of my favorite memories. I mean, it's funny because like we didn't really go into the details, but that's the thing with David Lynch with me is that I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, this means this and this because I don't think that he necessarily fucking does that. Like I do think that he has ideas, and I think that Mark Frost is the one that kind of tries to tie it all together to make it have this coherent mythology. But I don't think that like David Lynch doesn't want you to sit there and be like, this is the or like have a fucking YouTube video where it's like, here's Fire Walk with Me explained. Like that's not what he wants.
Yeah, I get it.
So yeah, man. So anyway, that is our fucking show. We'll be talking about Twin Peaks just in more detail, especially for covering the return. Danny, do you want to talk about what else is on our channel right now?
Well, we're covering Yellow Jackets. We just reviewed episode 7 before recording this video. So, season 3, episode 7, which we both think is the best episode of this season. We just reviewed that. That is up on the channel now. And Charlotte and I went to Monster Mania 62 at Cherry Hill. We got a bunch of cool stuff, including this awesome Twin Peaks pennant. We met a few people and we talk about it in a video together. So you can watch that on the channel. And that's, I think, Yellow Jackets and that are pretty much what we have. We're going to get into and finish Yellow Jackets. And then, like you said at the beginning, we're going to probably cover a few movies that are in the beyond horror element. We'll talk about it.
Hell yeah. Yeah, so let's make sure you guys are there with us too, and we'll see you guys next time at One Eyed Jacks.